Children in our town keep disappearing, and I think my stepdad is the cause behind it all. I didn't notice the first disappearance the night it happened. That's the part that keeps me awake now. I noticed it the next morning when my phone buzzed while I was brushing my teeth and I nearly dropped it into the sink. The headline was short, restrained, almost apologetic, like it didn't want to alarm anyone too much. Local child reported missing overnight. No signs of forced entry. I remember staring at my reflection, toothpaste foaming at the corner of my mouth, rereading it twice. Missing overnight felt oddly specific, as if the timing mattered more than the fact that a child was gone. I clicked the article. 7-year-old boy. Slept in his bed. Parents woke up to find him gone. Doors locked, windows intact, no alarms triggered. Police had no immediate suspects. I rinsed my mouth, wiped my face, and went downstairs, telling myself not to be dramatic. Our street was quiet, in the way suburban streets always are too quiet, but familiar enough that you stop questioning it. Identical mailboxes, lawns trimmed to regulation height, a jogger passing at the same time every morning. Nothing ever happened here. That's why I didn't feel afraid yet. At breakfast, my mom read the news on her tablet and shook her head. "That's awful," she said, already moving on to the weather. Poor family. My stepdad, Parker, sat at the table with his mug cupped in both hands. He looked tired. That wasn't unusual. He worked nights at a logistics warehouse on the edge of town, but there was something distant about him that morning, like he was still halfway somewhere else. "Did you hear about the kid?" my mom asked him. He nodded once. "Yeah, that's close by," she added. "Scary." Parker didn't respond. He finished his coffee, rinsed the mug, and went to shower. At the time, I thought nothing of it. I went to school, I complained about homework, I laughed at stupid things that didn't matter. That night, I slept like normal. The second child disappeared the following night. That's when things started to feel off. The alert came later this time, close to noon. Different child, different street. Same phrasing. Missing overnight, no forced entry. People started talking. Parents lingered at pickup instead of rushing off. Group chats lit up with theories, open windows, sleepwalking, custody disputes. Someone suggested it was probably just coincidence, and everyone clung to that word like it was a life raft. Coincidence. I walked home that afternoon and noticed new security signs staked into lawns, motion lights installed midday, curtains drawn tight even though the sun was out. Children confined at home when they used to be playing in the backyard around this time every day. Parker was asleep when I got home, sprawled across the bed like he'd collapsed rather than laid down. I stood in the doorway longer than I meant to, listening to his breathing. He didn't look like someone capable of anything. That thought embarrassed me for even forming. That night, he left for work at 9:40 p.m., same as always. I heard his keys, the soft click of the door, the low rumble of his car pulling away. I don't know why I watched the clock after that. Midnight came. Then 1. Then 2. At around 4 in the morning, headlights swept briefly across my bedroom wall. Parker was home. Later than usual. He was home by 2 a.m. on most nights. I noticed it, filed it away, and told myself it was meaningless. The third disappearance happened on a Thursday. This time, the news vans came. Reporters stood on sidewalks with solemn expressions, microphones raised. The language changed, from missing to vanished. From investigation ongoing to authorities baffled. The anchor said something that made my stomach tighten. All 3 children were last seen asleep in their beds. I sat on the couch watching, knees pulled to my chest. Parker stood behind me, leaning against the wall. I could feel his presence without looking at him. "Terrible," my mom murmured. Parker exhaled slowly. "Yeah." That night, he didn't come home until dawn. By then, I was awake. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening for the sound of his car. When it finally came, relief washed over me so fast, it almost felt like guilt. Relief that he was home. Relief that my fear had nothing concrete to attach itself to. The 4th disappearance broke something in the neighborhood. It was no longer abstract. No longer somewhere nearby. It was the street behind ours. I recognized the house from walking past it 100 times. Blue shutters, basketball hoop over the garage, chalk drawings still visible on the driveway. The child was 6. I watched the parents on TV, their faces hollow in a way I'd never seen before. There were no tears at first, just disbelief. Like if they stared at the camera long enough, reality might blink first. That evening, a community meeting was called at the school gym. Parents packed the bleachers. The police repeated the same phrases they'd been using all week. No signs of forced entry, no clear suspect, no immediate danger to the public. That last line made people angry. Parker didn't go. Too exhausted, he said, already loosening his tie. My mom kissed his cheek and told him to get some rest. I watched him disappear down the hallway, unease coiling tighter in my chest. The next day, I ran into Emily on the sidewalk. Emily lived 3 houses down. She was 9 and fearless in the way kids are before they learn better. She talked constantly, bouncing from topic to topic, always asking questions adults didn't know how to answer. She waved when she saw me. "My mom says I'm not allowed out at night anymore," she announced, offended. "That is probably smart," I said. She rolled her eyes. I'm not a baby. 2 days later, she came over with her dad to return a ladder they'd borrowed. Parker answered the door. Emily looked up at him, wrinkled her nose, and said, "You smell weird." Poor child didn't know better. Parker worked at a factory and always smelled funny, like chemicals. There was a pause. Just a beat too long. Then Emily gagged. She didn't even make it outside. She threw up on the mat, bright and sudden. Her dad apologized over and over, mortified. Parker waved him off, saying it was fine. Accidents happened. But I saw his jaw tighten. I saw the flash of something sharp cross his face before it smoothed back into politeness. That night, I lay awake thinking about that look. The next morning, Emily was gone. Her house was chaos when the police arrived. The door still locked. The window by her bed closed. Her backpack waiting by the door, packed for school. I felt sick. The vigil that evening was larger than any before. Candles lined the sidewalk. People whispered prayers. Someone sobbed openly. Parker didn't attend. He slept through it. That was the first time the thought crossed my mind, fully formed, not just a shadow at the edge of my awareness. What if it was him? What if the reason nothing made sense was because I didn't want it to? I hated myself for thinking it, for suspecting the man who'd helped raise me, who fixed leaky faucets and drove me to school when my mom worked late, who loved my mom so much and fulfilled his duty as our guardian better than our biological father. But the timing wouldn't leave me alone. Neither would the fact that every disappearance happened on nights he worked, or that he always came home just before dawn, or that no one could say exactly where he was during those hours, beyond at work. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't confront him. I didn't go to the police. I did something worse. I decided to watch. Because if I was wrong, I needed to know, and if I was right, I needed to know that too. I didn't understand yet that the truth was more complicated and more dangerous than anything I'd imagined. I just knew that children kept disappearing, and that the man sleeping down the hall from me was somehow tied to every single night it happened. Parker got sick on a Sunday. Not the dramatic kind that sends people rushing to the ER, but the kind that settles deep into the body and refuses to move. Fever that came and went. A cough that rattled his chest. Skin clammy one moment and flushed the next. He came home from work early, just before midnight. Shoulders slumped like he'd finally run out of momentum. My mom didn't hesitate to tend to him. She took his temperature, called in sick for him, set up camp in the bedroom with water and medicine. "I'll be fine," Parker muttered. "I just need some rest, that's all." He didn't return to work that night. Or the next. By Tuesday, the routine of the house had changed around him. The TV stayed on low volume in the bedroom. Soup simmered more often than usual. My mom checked his pulse like it was something she could control. I noticed something else by Tuesday evening. There were no alerts. No news banners scrolling ominously across the bottom of the screen. No names, no faces, no new houses cordoned off with tape. One night passed, then another. The silence wasn't comforting. It was heavy. Parents didn't relax. They didn't start letting their kids out again. The neighborhood stayed locked down, doors bolted, curtains drawn tight. The difference was in the way people spoke now, less frantic, more desperate. They didn't want reassurance. They wanted answers. Every conversation ended the same way. "Have you heard anything? Any updates?" They can't just be gone. At the grocery store, I saw Emily's mom standing in the cereal aisle, staring blankly at a shelf like she'd forgotten how choices worked. No one approached her. No one knew what to say anymore. By the third night of nothing happening, the absence itself became the story. The news ran segments about the investigation stalling. Police repeated that they were working around the clock. Search teams expanded outward. Volunteers combed wooded areas and abandoned buildings long after daylight faded. No one said it out loud, but everyone was thinking the same thing. If the children weren't being taken anymore, where were the ones already gone? Parker stayed in bed most of the week. When he did get up, he moved carefully, as if sudden motion might shatter him. My mom hovered constantly, worried in a way that was almost obsessive. I watched from the sidelines. I told myself the quiet meant nothing. That patterns can be illusions when you're scared enough to look for them. But by Thursday, the math in my head refused to go away. No Parker at work. No missing children. 4 nights. The community meeting that week was quieter than the last. Less shouting, more tears. Parents asked the same questions over and over, their voices cracking. When will they come home? Are they alive? Why won't anyone tell us anything? No one clapped when the police finished speaking this time. At dinner that night, my mom said softly, "It's strange." I thought I'd feel relieved by the quiet. She didn't. Neither did I. Parker pushed food around his plate, appetite gone. "Quiet doesn't mean over," he said. His voice was rough, still recovering. I looked up sharply. He didn't meet my eyes. That night, I lay awake listening to the house breathe, the creak of cooling pipes, the hum of the fridge, the faint cough from my parents' room. For the first time since this started, fear took a different shape. What if the silence wasn't safety? What if it was a pause? On Friday, I overheard my mom on the phone with another parent. No, she said gently, nothing new, I know it doesn't help. She lowered her voice. We can't stop looking for the lost children just because it has stopped. Parker was asleep on the couch when she hung up. I studied his face, the lines etched deeper by exhaustion, the stubble he hadn't bothered shaving. He looked like a man barely holding himself together, and that made everything worse. He didn't appear any different from the man my mom had fallen in love with. Sure, he was always exhausted, but that's because he was making sure our family always had enough on the table. He was even making sure all the extra expenses that came with raising a teenage daughter were covered, so I enjoyed my youth and never lacked anything. That afternoon, I went into his room while he showered. I didn't plan to search. Not really. I told myself I was just curious. That I wanted proof of my own paranoia. The room was painfully ordinary. Clothes folded neatly. Work boots by the door. A faint medicinal smell lingering in the air. Something else too, subtle. Sharp. I couldn't place it, but it made my throat tighten. The shower shut off. I retreated just in time, heart hammering, and passed him in the hallway as he emerged, towel slung over his shoulder. Are you all right? He asked softly, studying me. Yeah, I said, just checking on you. He smiled slowly. I'm getting better. Saturday marked a full week. 7 nights. No new disappearances, but the town hadn't moved on. There were still posters on every lamppost, still candle stubs melting into sidewalks, still parents sleeping lightly, waking at every sound. The quiet didn't erase the loss, it sharpened it. Parker returned to work on Sunday night. I watched him get ready, every movement suddenly significant. The way he checked his pockets, the way he paused at the door. Drive safe, my mom said. He smiled faintly. Always. Lock the doors and sleep well, my love. He kissed my mom on her forehead like he always does before leaving. The door closed. I turned on my phone notifications again that night. I needed them to make sense of everything. I sat on my bed, staring at the clock, counting the minutes. If nothing happened, I told myself, that maybe I could finally let go of the fear coiled in my chest. If something did, I didn't finish that thought. Morning came without alerts. But something inside me had shifted. The week had proven one thing I couldn't ignore anymore. The timing mattered, and coincidence could only stretch so far before it snapped. By the time Parker came home, exhaustion etched into his face again, I'd made up my mind. Watching from a distance wasn't enough. I needed to know where he went. What he did. Who he was when none of us were around. Next time he left for work, I wouldn't stay behind. I would follow him, and whatever truth was waiting at the end of that night, I would finally see it for myself. The alert came back 12 hours after the night Parker returned to work. That alone should have been enough to confirm everything I feared. Enough to cement the image of him as something monstrous. Something I'd been subconsciously building in my head for weeks. Instead, it shattered me in a way I wasn't prepared for. I was sitting at my desk pretending to study when my phone vibrated. I didn't even need to look at the screen to know what it was. My body reacted before my mind caught up, heart slamming, breath stalling halfway in my chest. Child reported missing overnight. My fingers went numb. Same phrasing, same tone, same awful calmness wrapped around something unforgivable. I read the details twice, then a third time. Different name, different face. Same town, same night. Parker had gone back to work. The house felt too quiet. My mom hadn't seen the alert yet. She was asleep, exhausted from a week of worry and caretaking. I sat there alone, the glow of my phone lighting up the walls, feeling like the world had narrowed to a single, unbearable point. So this was it. The week of silence hadn't been a coincidence. It hadn't been hope. It had been a pause. And now, whatever had been stalking our nights was back. I waited for anger to come, for certainty. Instead, confusion crept in. Parker came home later than usual again. Near dawn, I heard his keys, the careful way he closed the door like he didn't want to wake anyone. I stayed in my room, listening. He didn't go straight to bed. He stood in the kitchen for a long time. I could hear cupboards opening, water running, then the quiet clink of a mug being set down too hard like his hands were shaking. When I finally crept out, he was sitting at the table, head in his hands. You're up early, he said without looking up. And you got late, I replied softly, concerned. He glanced at the clock and sighed. Didn't even realize. I waited for something, defensiveness, irritation, anything, but all I saw was exhaustion. The kind that goes past tired and settles somewhere deeper. They're saying another kid's missing, I said, testing the words carefully. His head snapped up. What? You didn't see it? I asked. No, he said immediately, too immediately. Where? I told him. He leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly. He rubbed his face with both hands like he was trying to erase something. He trailed off. That's bad. There was no slip, no crack, just concern. Real concern. That afternoon, I watched him do something that made everything harder. He drove my mom to the grocery store because she'd forgotten her wallet and didn't want to walk back alone. He carried the bags inside without being asked. He fixed the loose hinge on the bathroom door. He made dinner while my mom rested. When she thanked him, he smiled softly and said, "You've had a long week." That wasn't the behavior of someone who felt untouchable. That wasn't the behavior of someone hiding something so monstrous it swallowed children whole. And yet, that night, as he got ready for work again, the alert still burned in my mind. "I'll be late," he said, slipping on his jacket, short-staffed. My mom nodded sleepily. "Don't overdo it." He hesitated at the door. Then, quietly, "Lock up after me." I watched his taillights disappear down the street, and then I grabbed my bike. I didn't tell myself I was following him because I believed he was guilty. I told myself I was following him because I didn't. Because I needed something concrete, something undeniable, to replace the knot of fear and suspicion twisting inside me. I waited 10 minutes before leaving. Then another 5. I followed at a distance, far enough back that I wouldn't be obvious, close enough not to lose him. My hands shook on the handles of my bike, every red light feeling like a test of my nerve. He drove the same route he always did. No detours. No sudden turns. The warehouse loomed ahead, all dull concrete and harsh lighting, humming with late-night activity. Trucks parked in orderly rows. Employees coming and going in reflective vests. Nothing sinister. I parked across the street and watched. Parker swiped his badge and disappeared inside. I waited. Then I waited some more. Finally, heart pounding, I crossed the street and slipped inside behind a group of workers heading in from break. No one stopped me. No one questioned why I was there. The place smelled like oil and cardboard and stale coffee. Conveyor belts rattled constantly. Forklifts beeped as they reversed. It was loud, chaotic, aggressively normal. I spotted Parker almost immediately. He was exactly where he was supposed to be. Scanning manifests, checking loads, talking with supervisors, moving from station to station with purpose. I stayed tucked near a stack of pallets, watching him like my life depended on it. He didn't vanish. Not once. He didn't slip away. Didn't disappear into shadowed corners or unmonitored areas. Every time he moved, someone else moved with him. Hours passed. I watched him cover 2 stations when someone didn't show up. I watched him help a guy struggling with a jammed conveyor belt. I watched him rub his eyes and take a sip of coffee that looked like it hadn't helped at all. At one point, a younger guy approached him, apologetic. "Sorry, man," the guy said. "Gotta head out early. Kid's not sleeping." "My wife's losing it." Parker nodded without hesitation. "Go, I'll cover." "You sure?" "Yeah," Parker said. "Go home." The guy hesitated. "Thanks. Seriously." Parker waved him off and stepped into his place. I stared at him, heart thudding. This wasn't someone sneaking away under cover of chaos. This was someone anchoring the chaos together. By 3 a.m., his movements slowed, his shoulders sagged. But he didn't stop. He kept working, checking, lifting, filling in wherever needed. If he was doing something else, something terrible, there was no room for it here. No time. No absence. By the time dawn crept in through the high windows, my certainty had evaporated completely. I slipped out before he noticed me, mind reeling. When he came home later that morning, he looked wrecked. "I'm exhausted," he admitted, sinking onto the couch. "They keep losing people. Everyone's stretched thin." My mom frowned. "You can't keep this up." "I know," he said quietly. I went to my room and shut the door. Nothing added up anymore. The timing said one thing. Reality said another. If Parker wasn't disappearing, if he was working more, not less, if he was the one picking up the slack, then how had another child vanished the same night? And if it wasn't him, the thought that followed was worse than any suspicion I'd had before, because it meant the danger was still out there, and I had been watching the wrong person all along. I didn't want to check my phone that morning. I knew what it would say before I even unlocked it. Child reported missing overnight. Another child, another name. Another face I didn't recognize, but the same hollow panic settling in my chest like it belonged there. By now, I should have been relieved or terrified in a new way. Instead, I felt clarity. Parker hadn't been the one, not the last night, not the night before, not any of the nights I had followed him. That part of the equation was finally clear. He wasn't vanishing. He wasn't sneaking around. He was working, exhausted, overtired, doing more than anyone could reasonably ask. The problem wasn't him. The problem was still out there. I sat in my room for a long time, staring at the glow of my phone and trying to decide what to do. My notebook was open, pen hovering, full of scribbles, dates, times, and suspicious alignments. But the clarity only raised more questions. Then I realized something else. I wasn't the only one paying attention. Parker had noticed the pattern too. I had no proof, but I knew him. I had always known him. The way he squinted at the news, the way he paused when names were mentioned, the way he muttered under his breath about schedules, coverage, and lost hours. He was watching, observing, planning, something, and the thought made me uneasy in a new way. That night, he left for work again. Later than usual, dragging his coat over tired shoulders. My mom waved half-heartedly from the couch. "I'll be late," he said, short-staffed again. I nodded, but something inside me refused to stay put. Hours passed, midnight, 1, 2. By 3, I was pacing my room, unable to ignore the knot of unease in my chest. By 4 a.m., I grabbed my jacket, phone, and keys. If he was exhausted, he might have needed help. Maybe, just maybe, he hadn't returned yet, because something had gone wrong. I followed the same route I had taken before, careful not to be seen, careful not to make a sound. The night air was heavy, thick with the scent of damp asphalt and distant exhaust fumes. The warehouse came into view, bathed in harsh sodium light. Forklifts idled near loading docks. Men and women in reflective vests moved methodically, almost like clockwork. But something was different. Parker wasn't at the front door yet. I slipped through the chain-link fence and crouched behind a low bush near one of the peripheral exits, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. And then I saw him. He wasn't pacing. He wasn't wandering. He wasn't hiding in some shadowed corner like I had imagined the first few nights. He was crouched low behind a patch of overgrown bushes, eyes sharp, breathing steady despite the fatigue evident in his hunched shoulders. His jacket was damp with dew, sleeves rolled up past the elbows, hands resting lightly on the ground for balance. Alert. Watching. I swallowed hard. "Parker?" I whispered, half expecting him to snap at me. His head turned toward me, eyes flashing, concern, not anger, not surprise. "Go back inside," he said quietly. "It's not safe here." "Why are you out here?" I asked. "Same reason you followed me out here. The danger, the lost children," he said. His voice was calm, measured, but it carried weight. "I'm trying to see what's happening." The tension in his posture didn't leave. He wasn't relaxed. He didn't have the luxury of being tired in this moment. I crouched beside him, careful not to breathe too loudly. "The child. Another one went missing tonight," I said. He didn't respond immediately. He just shifted slightly, eyes narrowing on something across the parking lot, a small figure moving hesitantly, carrying a clipboard. A young man in a reflective vest, obviously nervous, checking and rechecking boxes on the manifest. The same colleague who had recently asked Parker to cover for him. Parker's jaw tightened, but his voice softened. "He's not the kidnapper," he said, almost to himself. "Not directly." I blinked, confused. "Then why are you watching him?" He exhaled sharply, brushing wet hair from his forehead. "He's involved. Not in the way people think, but he's connected. If I lose sight of him for even a moment, I won't see the next step. I won't know what he's doing. And that could cost another child." I wanted to argue, to tell him he was overthinking it, but the way he scanned the lot, checking every shadow, every moving vehicle, every reflective surface, made me pause. The exhaustion in his posture didn't make him less vigilant. It made him terrifyingly precise. Hours passed. He stayed behind the bush, silent, alert, eyes tracking the young colleague across the lot. Occasionally, he scribbled something on a small notepad he had pulled from his coat pocket, glancing between it and the man like a predator studying prey, but without the malice a predator might carry. It wasn't cruelty I saw. It was calculation, protection, responsibility. My stomach twisted, confusion, fear, guilt, all tangled together. I had been suspecting an innocent person all along, that to someone who is family to me, by the time the sun rose high in the sky and illuminated upon the edge of the warehouse roof, Parker finally moved. Not quickly, not abruptly, but with careful precision, melting back into the flow of the lot's morning shift. I wanted to confront him, ask questions, beg for answers, but I stayed behind the bush, heart pounding, silent as he disappeared into the fluorescent-lit interior. For the first time, I realized something important. Parker wasn't the one taking the children, but he was watching, always watching, and he'd been watching all along. He had been observing the right suspects. I exhaled slowly, shivering in the morning cold, my hands trembling. Whatever was happening, whatever pattern had swallowed our town whole, Parker was part of the only line standing between it and the next victim. And somehow I knew that following him tonight had just changed everything. Because now I wasn't just observing a man I suspected, I was watching someone who was a protector in the depths of his core. Parker didn't need to say it. He pulled me close as soon as we crouched behind the chain-link fence, eyes scanning the warehouse lot like a hawk. Tonight, it was happening. The young colleague and his gang were finally moving. They had the children. Emily was among them, and this time, there was no chance to turn away. Once they left the town, the kids would vanish forever. My heart thudded so violently, I thought it might give me away. Parker pressed a hand against my shoulder, steadying me, and whispered, "Stay with me. Don't move until I say. You must remain safe. Just hide behind me if the situation gets worse." I nodded, gripping my phone. My thumb hovered over the SOS button, ready. I didn't hesitate. I tapped it, sending the signal to the police and automatically pinging Parker. I trusted him with my life, and the small warmth of realization in his eyes steadied me amidst the fear. The cargo truck sat waiting under dim floodlights, ordinary, mundane, perfectly designed to look like nothing. Shadows shifted around it as the young colleague and 3 other men hurried children inside. Emily clutched the hand of a younger girl, her wide eyes reflecting terror I couldn't ignore. Parker's jaw tightened. He surveyed the lot, the truck, the gang's movements, calculating. "We don't have much time," he muttered. "If they get out of the lot, the police won't reach them in time." We moved together silently toward the side of the truck. I jumped into the waiting truck where the children were all held hostage. Before we could lead the scared children out of the truck, 2 more men circled around the truck. Parker had to shut us all in. He promised he'd be back, and by the looks of it, he was reluctant to leave us all trapped in there. But Parker's presence calmed the children. His voice carried authority without fear, strength without aggression. Then, he made the decision. "I'm stopping them now," he whispered, almost to himself. "I'll force them to pause. You keep the kids close to the back so none of you gets hurt." Then the door shut and we were trapped in the dark container of the truck. I couldn't guess what he was up to, but his footsteps echoed just as loudly as the Predator men's panicking, but low voice. The truck we were in suddenly revved up the engine, but I also heard a second engine starting almost a second later. My stomach dropped as I realized what he was about to do, block the trafficker's path. I shouted, "Parker, wait!" My voice drowned behind all the panicked screams of children as the truck accelerated. All the children clung to my side. For a moment, I didn't believe Parker would be able to stop them anyhow. Part of me was concerned for my stepdad only, even as I sat in the kidnapper's dark truck. I clenched my eyes shut and prayed for the safety of these children and Parker. Then came a sudden screech of tires before the truck came to an abrupt halt. Not before bumping heavily into something. I prayed it wasn't Parker. That this is not the way he planned to block the truck's path. The impact was brutal. Metal crunched. The cargo truck swerved, sending us all crashing on the walls of the truck from within. The children screamed, small, terrified, and confused, but most of them were unharmed. Emily's eyes were wide as she clutched my hand, her body trembling. None of us stepped out, no matter how much I wanted to check on Parker. We stayed put only until the distant sirens of police cars were within earshot. I stepped out first, cautiously. The gang had been brutally bruised, although still conscious. I didn't hesitate. I guided Emily and the other children behind the containers and into the bushes while the gang scrambled, trying to get the cargo truck moving again, but the moment had come. The cops were approaching fast. Parker's truck had been hit on the side, metal crumpled and disfigured. My eyes filled with tears and heart with panic as I rushed towards him. For a moment I forgot about the children, but at least they were hidden well and the cops were near. Parker groaned, slumping over the wheel as blood trickled down his temple. I ran to him, panic clawing at my throat. "Dad!" I screamed, not realizing what I had called him, but at that I didn't care. "BCS, I meant it anyways, stay with me." I pleaded him. He blinked, dazed, but tried to focus. I'm okay," he rasped, though his voice betrayed the pain. "The kids, they're safe." "You're safe." The police arrived in a flurry, lights flashing, commands shouted, and the traffickers froze. The young colleague and his gang were caught off guard, trapped between the stopped trucks and the law finally closing in. Officers pulled them out of the truck and secured the area. I turned back toward Dad. He was bleeding but conscious, a weak smile brushing his lips as he saw Emily and the others safe. "You did. Good," he whispered hoarsely. I clutched his hand, tears streaming. "You're insane," I said. You could have died." "I had to," he rasped, trying to sit up. This was the only chance. Paramedics arrived, and he was lifted onto a stretcher. The relief on my face was immediate, though my hands shook as they placed him carefully into the ambulance. He squeezed my hand faintly before they pulled him away. Hours later in the hospital, I sat by his bedside. Emily had been returned safely to her parents. The other children reunited with theirs. Most had barely a scratch, just tears and wide eyes still processing the terror of the night. Dad's head was bandaged. His arm rested awkwardly on the sheets, still tender from the crash, but his eyes were sharp, alive. He gave me a small nod. "I'm all right," he said, voice hoarse but steady. "Thanks to you." I smiled weakly, brushing a damp strand of hair from my face. "You're impossible," I said softly. He chuckled faintly, exhaustion weighing down the sound. "Everyone's safe. I'm glad, but your mom won't be as lenient once we get home. We're a team, Dad. We'll take Mom's beating together." I smiled, which Dad reciprocated. His eyes widened just noticeably by the name I had called him. And in that quiet hospital room with the sun climbing outside the window, I finally believed it. The town's children were safe. The traffickers were caught. And Parker, my dad, my confidant, the man I had feared yet trusted, was alive. For the first time in weeks, I could finally breathe.
Thanks for watching. If you liked our videos and want to see more of such content, subscribe to my channel and hit the like, share, and comment icon down below. These story plots are entirely original, and the entire process is reliant on one-woman efficiency. To grow and support this community, follow me on TikTok and Instagram. Thank you.